reciprocity. The Theosophical Society, Part 1. The Birth of Modern Esoteric Thought. In every age, humanity has searched for answers to the great mysteries. Who are we? Why are we here? Is there a reality beyond the physical world? During the 19th century, these ancient questions would inspire one of history's most influential spiritual movements, a movement that would shape modern metaphysics, influence psychology, inspire countless authors, and introduce millions of Westerners to ideas like karma, reincarnation, and universal brotherhood. This is the story of the Theosophical Society. A world in transition. The 19th century was an era unlike any before it. The Industrial Revolution had transformed Europe and North America, bringing unprecedented technological progress. Steam engines powered factories, railroads connected distant cities, and telegraphs allowed messages to travel across continents in minutes rather than weeks. Science was advancing at a remarkable pace. Geologists were discovering evidence that the Earth was far older than previously believed. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution challenged long-held religious interpretations of creation. New discoveries in chemistry, astronomy, and physics reshaped humanity's understanding of the universe. Yet with these advances came uncertainty. Many people found themselves caught between traditional religious beliefs and the rapidly expanding world of science. Churches remained influential, but scientific discoveries raised difficult questions about humanity's place in creation. At the same time, interest in ancient civilizations, Egypt, India, Tibet, Greece, and Babylon, grew dramatically as archaeologists uncovered forgotten temples, manuscripts, and artifacts. Across Europe and America, people began looking beyond conventional religion for answers. One of the most popular movements was spiritualism, which emerged in the United States in the late 1840s. Spiritualists believed that the living could communicate with the spirits of the dead through mediums. Seances became fashionable social events, attracting people from all walks of life. Reports of mysterious knocking sounds, automatic writing, spirit photography, and table turning fascinated the public. Some participants believed these phenomena offered proof of life after death. Others viewed them with skepticism, suspecting fraud or psychological suggestion. Nevertheless, spiritualism sparked widespread interest in psychic experiences and the possibility that unseen dimensions of reality might exist. This growing curiosity about the unseen world formed the backdrop against which a new movement would emerge. Unlike spiritualism, however, this movement would not focus primarily on communication with the dead. Instead, it would seek to unite science, philosophy, and religion into a single framework, drawing upon wisdom traditions from both East and West. That movement would become known as Theosophy. What does Theosophy mean? The word Theosophy comes from two Greek words, theos, meaning divine, and sophy, meaning wisdom. Taken together, the term means divine wisdom. Although the Theosophical Society was founded in 1875, the concept of Theosophy is much older. Throughout history, philosophers and mystics had used the term to describe the pursuit of spiritual knowledge through direct experience rather than blind belief. The founders of the society believed that beneath all religions lay a universal wisdom tradition, a body of spiritual truth that had been preserved throughout history by enlightened teachers. According to theosophical teachings, this ancient wisdom appeared in different forms throughout the world's religions and philosophical systems. Whether one studied Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, ancient Egyptian religion, Greek philosophy, or Hermetic teachings, Theosophists believed common spiritual principles could be found beneath their outward differences. This idea of a universal spiritual tradition would become one of the society's defining characteristics. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. No individual shaped the early history of the Theosophical Society more than Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, often referred to simply by her initials, HPB. She was born on August 12, 1831, in Yekaterinoslav, then part of the Russian Empire, now in modern-day Ukraine. Blavatsky came from an aristocratic family with military and literary connections. Her father served as an officer in the Imperial Russian Army, while her mother was a respected novelist. From an early age, Blavatsky displayed an independent personality and a fascination with mystical subjects. Family members later recalled her unusual imagination, curiosity about ancient cultures, and interest in stories involving supernatural experiences. Some later accounts, largely based on Blavatsky's own recollections and those of her associates, describe extraordinary psychic experiences during her childhood. These stories include claims of visions, encounters with mysterious figures, and a lifelong sense that she was being guided by unseen teachers. Historians note that many of these accounts are difficult to verify independently, and they remain a subject of debate. At the age of 17, Blavatsky entered into a brief arranged marriage with Nikifor Blavatsky, a government official significantly older than she was. The marriage ended quickly, and she soon embarked on years of travel. Her travels became one of the most discussed and disputed aspects of her life. Blavatsky later claimed to have journeyed extensively through Europe, the Middle East, India, Egypt, and Tibet. According to her own accounts, these travels brought her into contact with spiritual adepts whom she called the Mahatmas, or Masters of Wisdom. She described these figures as highly advanced spiritual teachers dedicated to guiding humanity's evolution. Chief among them were two individuals known as Morya and Kuthumi. Supporters accepted these accounts as genuine spiritual experiences. Skeptics questioned whether all of the journeys took place as described, noting that documentation for certain periods of her life is incomplete. Modern historians generally agree that Blavatsky traveled widely, but debate continues regarding the extent of some of her claimed travels and encounters. Regardless of where one stands on those questions, there is little doubt that Blavatsky possessed remarkable charisma, a vast knowledge of comparative religion, and an ability to synthesize ideas from many traditions into a compelling spiritual philosophy. America and the Spiritualist Movement. In 1873, Blavatsky arrived in New York City. The United States was then in the midst of a spiritualist boom. Mediums held public demonstrations, newspapers reported on seances, and many prominent citizens investigated claims of communication with the dead. Among those investigating these phenomena was Henry Steel Olcott. Olcott had already lived an accomplished life. Born in New Jersey in 1832, he had worked as a journalist, lawyer, agricultural expert, and investigator. During the American Civil War, he served as a special investigator for the Union government, earning the honorary title of colonel by which he would become widely known. In 1874, Olcott traveled to Chittenden, Vermont, to report on the alleged paranormal phenomena occurring at the Eddy farmhouse, where seances were attracting national attention. It was there that he met Helena Blavatsky. The two quickly formed a close intellectual partnership. Both believed that many reported psychic phenomena deserved serious investigation, but both also thought that spiritualism alone failed to explain the deeper nature of consciousness and spiritual evolution. Together, they began envisioning a broader philosophical movement. Founding the Society on September 7, 1875, a group of scholars, spiritualists, Freemasons, physicians, lawyers, and seekers gathered in New York following a lecture on ancient esoteric traditions. During the discussion, the idea arose to establish an organization devoted to studying humanity's spiritual heritage. Thus, the Theosophical Society was born. Henry Steel Olcott became its first president. Helena Blavatsky served as corresponding secretary and quickly emerged as its leading philosophical voice. The Society adopted three central objectives, which continue to define it today: to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color; to encourage the comparative study of religion, philosophy, and science; to investigate unexplained laws of nature and the latent powers within human beings. For the late 19th century, the first objective was especially notable. At a time when racial and religious divisions remained widespread, the Society emphasized the spiritual equality of all people. Its meetings attracted individuals from diverse backgrounds who shared a common interest in exploring questions beyond conventional religion and materialist science. A new vision. Unlike many religious organizations, the Theosophical Society did not require members to accept a specific creed. Instead, it encouraged independent inquiry. Members were free to maintain their existing religious beliefs while studying philosophy, science, comparative religion, and metaphysical ideas. Blavatsky argued that truth could not belong exclusively to any single religion or institution. Rather, she believed that fragments of a greater wisdom could be found throughout humanity's spiritual history. This open approach appealed to many intellectuals who sought a broader understanding of religion in an age increasingly shaped by scientific discovery. Within only a few years, the society began attracting international attention. Its greatest impact, however, was still to come. In 1877, Helena Blavatsky published a massive 2-volume work that would establish her reputation around the world. Its title was Isis Unveiled. The book challenged conventional assumptions about religion, science, and history while proposing that an ancient wisdom tradition underlay all civilizations. It became an unexpected bestseller, launching the Theosophical movement onto the international stage and setting the course for one of the most influential spiritual organizations of the modern era. The Theosophical Society Part 2, Isis Unveiled, India and the Birth of a Worldwide Movement. By the late 1870s, the Theosophical Society had survived its uncertain beginnings. What had started as a small gathering of seekers in New York was about to become an international movement. At the center of this transformation stood Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, whose next book would challenge both science and religion while inspiring thousands to explore what she believed was humanity's forgotten spiritual heritage. A monumental work. In September of 1877, Helena Blavatsky published a remarkable 2-volume work entitled Isis Unveiled, a master key to the mysteries of ancient and modern science and theology. The publication was unlike anything readers had encountered. Stretching well over 1,000 pages, the work combined philosophy, comparative religion, ancient history, occult traditions, mythology, and critiques of both organized religion and contemporary scientific materialism. Blavatsky argued that the great civilizations of Egypt, India, Greece, Tibet, Persia, and other ancient cultures possessed fragments of a profound spiritual wisdom that had gradually been forgotten or misunderstood. She maintained that behind every major religion lay a common source of truth. Rather than creating an entirely new philosophy, she believed she was helping restore an ancient one. Science and religion. During the 19th century, science and religion often appeared to be moving further apart. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution had challenged literal interpretations of the Bible. Geologists had demonstrated that the Earth was vastly older than traditional chronologies suggested. Physicists and chemists were uncovering natural laws that seemed to reduce many mysteries to mathematical principles. Some thinkers concluded that science would eventually explain everything. Others feared that scientific progress threatened religious faith. Blavatsky proposed a third possibility. She argued that both science and religion were incomplete. According to her, true understanding required a synthesis of scientific observation, philosophical inquiry, and spiritual experience. She believed that future science would eventually discover realities that ancient spiritual traditions had already understood. Although many of her specific ideas remain outside mainstream science, her broader vision of integrating scientific curiosity with philosophical exploration attracted considerable interest. Immediate public response. Isis Unveiled became an unexpected success. Thousands of copies were sold during its first years. Readers included scholars, ministers, scientists, spiritualists, Freemasons, artists, physicians, and ordinary people searching for answers beyond conventional religious teaching. Reviews varied dramatically. Supporters praised the book's enormous scope and originality. Critics argued that it contained historical inaccuracies, questionable sources, and unsupported claims. Some scholars questioned Blavatsky's interpretations of ancient texts. Others admired her ability to introduce Western readers to Eastern philosophies that had previously been little known outside Asia. Regardless of the criticism, the book established Blavatsky as one of the most widely discussed spiritual writers of her generation. The society begins to grow. Membership in the Theosophical Society expanded steadily. Branches appeared throughout the United States. Soon, interest spread across Europe. People from different religious traditions joined the organization while continuing to identify as Christians, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, or freethinkers. The society encouraged discussion rather than dogma. Unlike many religious organizations of the time, it required no profession of faith. Instead, members were invited to investigate spiritual ideas for themselves. This emphasis on independent inquiry became one of the movement's defining characteristics. Looking east, although the society had begun in New York, Blavatsky and Henry Steel Olcott increasingly believed that its future lay in Asia. They regarded India in particular as one of humanity's oldest centers of philosophical and spiritual knowledge. Many Hindu and Buddhist texts had only recently become available in Europe through new translations. Western scholars were beginning to appreciate the sophistication of Indian philosophy. Blavatsky believed these traditions preserved elements of the ancient wisdom she sought to revive. In late 1878, Blavatsky and Olcott departed New York. Their destination was India. It would become the permanent home of the Theosophical Society. Arrival in India. The pair arrived in Bombay in 1879. Their reception surprised even them. Indian intellectuals welcomed their respectful attitude toward Hindu philosophy at a time when many Western writers viewed Indian traditions through a colonial lens. Blavatsky and Olcott openly praised Hinduism and Buddhism as profound philosophical systems. They argued that these traditions deserved the same respect as Christianity or classical Western philosophy. Many educated Indians found this refreshing. At a time when British colonial rule often portrayed indigenous religions as inferior, the Theosophists presented them as repositories of ancient wisdom. This earned the society considerable goodwill. The magazine The Theosophist. Soon after arriving in India, Blavatsky founded a monthly journal called The Theosophist. The publication quickly became one of the society's most important tools. It published articles on Hindu philosophy, Buddhism, ancient Egypt, comparative religion, archaeology, mysticism, psychic phenomena, yoga, Sanskrit literature, Western esotericism. Contributors came from around the world. The magazine helped establish communication between Eastern and Western scholars long before globalization made such exchanges common. It remains in publication today. Colonel Olcott's mission. While Blavatsky focused primarily on writing and philosophy, Henry Steel Olcott became an energetic organizer. He traveled extensively throughout India and Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, then known as Ceylon, he became deeply involved in the revival of Buddhism. At that time, Buddhist institutions had suffered under centuries of colonial influence. Olcott worked alongside local leaders to establish Buddhist schools, publish educational materials, and strengthen Buddhist identity. He even wrote the Buddhist Catechism, first published in 1881. Remarkably, the book continues to be used in some Buddhist educational settings more than a century later. Many Sri Lankan Buddhists remember Olcott as an important supporter of Buddhist education. Statues honoring him still stand in Sri Lanka today. The headquarters at Adyar. In 1882, the society purchased a large estate on the banks of the Adyar River near Madras, now Chennai. This property became the Society's international headquarters. Known simply as Adyar, it soon developed into far more than an administrative center. Visitors from every continent came to study philosophy, compare religious traditions, attend lectures, and explore spiritual ideas. The grounds included libraries, lecture halls, gardens, temples, and research collections. One of its greatest treasures became the Adyar Library, containing thousands of rare manuscripts in Sanskrit, Pali, Tibetan, Persian, Arabic, and other languages. The library evolved into one of the world's important centers for the study of Eastern philosophy and comparative religion. Even today, scholars continue to use its collections. The Mahatma Letters. During the early 1880s, another development attracted enormous attention. Several members reported receiving letters allegedly written by the Mahatmas Maurya and Kuthumi. These communications became known as the Mahatma Letters. According to believers, the letters appeared through extraordinary means and contained philosophical teachings concerning karma, reincarnation, spiritual evolution, and the future of humanity. Supporters viewed them as evidence that advanced spiritual teachers actively guided the society. Skeptics questioned their authenticity, suggesting that they may have originated through more conventional means. The authorship of the Mahatma Letters has remained one of the most debated subjects in the history of Theosophy. Regardless of differing opinions, the letters became foundational documents within the movement and continue to be studied by many Theosophists. The three objects. As the society matured, its mission became more clearly defined. Its three objects remained at the center of its work. First, to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, religion, nationality, caste, or gender. Second, to encourage the comparative study of religion, philosophy, and science. Third, to investigate unexplained laws of nature and the latent powers within humanity. These objectives distinguish the society from organizations devoted solely to religious worship or occult practice. It sought to be educational, philosophical, and investigative. East meets West. Perhaps the Society's greatest achievement during its first decade was serving as a bridge between civilizations. Before the late 19th century, many Western readers knew little about Hinduism, Buddhism, karma, reincarnation, yoga, or meditation. Through lectures, books, journals, and translations, the Theosophists helped introduce these concepts to Western audiences. Although scholars today recognize that some early interpretations reflected the perspectives and limitations of their era, there is broad agreement that the Society played a significant role in stimulating Western interest in Eastern thought. Its influence would soon spread even further. In 1888, Helena Blavatsky would publish what many regard as her masterpiece, The Secret Doctrine. The book would become one of the most influential and controversial works in the history of modern esotericism. It proposed an ambitious vision of the universe, human evolution, and the spiritual destiny of humanity that continues to inspire discussion more than a century later. The Theosophical Society Part 3. The Secret Doctrine, the Philosophy that Changed Modern Metaphysics. By the late 1880s, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky had already become one of the most discussed spiritual writers of the Victorian era. Yet the work that would define her legacy was still ahead. In 1888, after years of research, correspondence, and writing, she published a massive 2-volume work that attempted nothing less than explaining the origin of the universe, humanity, consciousness, and spiritual evolution. The book was called The Secret Doctrine. To believers, it represented the restoration of humanity's oldest wisdom. To critics, it was one of the most ambitious and controversial works of esoteric philosophy ever written. Returning to Europe, by the mid-1880s, Helena Blavatsky's health had begun to decline. Years of constant travel, writing, and organizational work had taken their toll. At the same time, the Society itself was facing increasing public scrutiny. Newspapers questioned Blavatsky's extraordinary claims, while critics challenged the authenticity of reported psychic phenomena associated with the Society. Despite these difficulties, Blavatsky remained determined to complete what she believed would be her life's greatest work. In 1885, she left India and eventually settled in Europe, spending much of her remaining life in Germany, Belgium, and finally London. There, surrounded by devoted students and assistants, she devoted nearly all her energy to writing. The Secret Doctrine, published in 1888, The Secret Doctrine consisted of 2 enormous volumes. The first volume, Cosmogenesis, explored the origin and evolution of the universe. The second, Anthropogenesis, examined the spiritual evolution of humanity. Rather than presenting herself as the creator of these teachings, Blavatsky stated that she was compiling and explaining ancient wisdom preserved through generations of initiates and spiritual teachers. According to her, fragments of this wisdom appeared throughout history in sacred texts, myths, symbols, and philosophical traditions. Her goal was to reveal the underlying principles common to them all. The stanzas of Dzyan. At the heart of the Secret Doctrine were mysterious verses known as the stanzas of Dzyan. Blavatsky claimed these verses originated from an ancient esoteric text preserved by advanced spiritual adepts. She described the stanzas as one of humanity's oldest surviving records of cosmic evolution. No independent historical evidence has confirmed the existence of the original manuscript exactly as Blavatsky described it. Supporters regard the stanzas as authentic esoteric teachings. Historians generally consider them part of theosophical tradition rather than independently verified historical documents. Regardless of their origin, the stanzas of Dzyan became the foundation upon which Blavatsky built her cosmology. The universe is alive. One of Blavatsky's central ideas was that the universe is not merely physical. According to theosophical teaching, every star, planet, atom, and living being participates in an ongoing process of spiritual evolution. Matter and consciousness are not separate. Instead, consciousness exists throughout the cosmos in varying degrees of development. The universe itself is viewed as a living, evolving system. Rather than beginning with a single act of creation, existence unfolds through immense cycles lasting millions or even billions of years. Modern cosmology does not adopt this metaphysical framework, but historians note that such ideas drew upon Hindu and Buddhist concepts of cyclical time rather than the linear histories common in many Western traditions. Cycles of creation. Blavatsky taught that the universe repeatedly passes through alternating periods of activity and rest. These immense cycles were called manvantaras and pralayas. During a manvantara, worlds, stars, and life emerge and evolve. During a pralaya, manifestation gradually dissolves into a state of rest before a new cycle begins. This cyclical vision differs significantly from many Western religious traditions, but parallels ideas found in several Indian philosophical systems. Karma. Among the teachings most widely associated with Theosophy is karma. Although karma had been central to Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism for centuries, relatively few Western readers were familiar with the concept before the late 19th century. Theosophy presented karma as a universal law of moral cause and effect. Every thought, action, and intention contributes to future experiences. Importantly, theosophical writers emphasized that karma is not viewed as punishment. Instead, it functions as a natural law of balance through which individuals learn and grow. This understanding differs from the idea of divine reward or punishment administered by an external authority. Instead, individuals participate in shaping their own future through their choices. Today, the concept of karma has entered popular culture around the world, though often in simplified forms. Reincarnation. Closely connected with karma is the teaching of reincarnation. According to Theosophy, the human soul undergoes many lifetimes. Each incarnation provides opportunities for learning, growth, and spiritual development. Rather than viewing death as an ending, Theosophy describes it as a transition between successive lives. Blavatsky argued that reincarnation helps explain apparent inequalities in human experience while providing a long-term perspective on spiritual progress. These ideas reflected long-established Eastern religious teachings but were relatively unfamiliar to many Western audiences at the time. The Society played a significant role in introducing reincarnation into Western philosophical discussion. 7 Principles of the Human Being. Theosophy describes human beings as possessing multiple aspects rather than consisting solely of body and mind. Although different theosophical authors presented slightly different classifications, Blavatsky commonly described 7 interrelated principles. These included the physical body, life force, emotional nature, mental faculties, spiritual intuition, and higher spiritual consciousness. The number 7 appears repeatedly throughout theosophical writings. 7 principles, 7 planes, 7 rounds, 7 root races, 7 stages of development. Blavatsky believed this numerical symbolism reflected universal patterns found throughout nature and spiritual evolution. The 7 planes. Another influential teaching involved the concept of multiple planes of existence. According to Theosophy, reality extends far beyond the physical world. The physical universe represents only one level within a much larger spectrum of existence. Higher planes correspond to increasingly refined states of consciousness. After death, individuals continue their spiritual journey through these subtler dimensions before eventually reincarnating. Although these ideas are metaphysical beliefs rather than scientifically established facts, they have influenced numerous later spiritual movements. Root races. Perhaps no aspect of the secret doctrine has generated more discussion than its teaching concerning the root races. According to Theosophical cosmology, humanity evolves through a sequence of vast developmental stages called root races. Blavatsky described these as spiritual epochs rather than biological races in the modern genetic sense. Among these stages, she referred to civilizations associated with Lemuria and Atlantis. In theosophical teaching, these names symbolize earlier phases in humanity's spiritual development. Prosody rate 7%. Mainstream archaeology, anthropology, and geology do not support the historical existence of Atlantis or Lemuria as described in theosophical literature. Modern scholars generally regard these accounts as part of theosophical cosmology rather than established history. Because terminology such as root races has sometimes been misunderstood or misused, contemporary historians often emphasize the importance of reading these ideas within their original 19th century theosophical context. Ancient civilizations. Blavatsky believed that advanced civilizations had existed long before recorded history. She suggested that myths from many cultures preserved symbolic memories of these forgotten eras. Flood legends, sacred mountains, divine teachers, and heroic figures appeared across civilizations because they reflected universal spiritual truths. Whether interpreted literally or symbolically, these stories became central to later esoteric literature. Writers throughout the 20th century frequently drew inspiration from Blavatsky's synthesis of mythology and comparative religion. Evolution of consciousness. Perhaps the most enduring contribution of the secret doctrine was its emphasis on the evolution of consciousness. Darwin had described biological evolution. Blavatsky proposed that consciousness itself evolves through countless experiences over immense spans of time. Humanity, according to Theosophy, represents only one stage within a much larger spiritual journey. Every individual possesses the potential for continued growth toward greater wisdom and compassion. This optimistic view of spiritual evolution profoundly influenced later metaphysical movements. A lasting influence. When The Secret Doctrine appeared in 1888, many readers found it extraordinarily challenging. Its pages combined philosophy, mythology, comparative religion, Sanskrit terminology, symbolism, and speculative cosmology. Yet despite its complexity, the work inspired generations of seekers. Later thinkers, including Annie Besant, Rudolf Steiner, Alice Bailey, and Manly P. Hall, would each draw in different ways upon concepts introduced or popularized through Blavatsky's writings. For some, The Secret Doctrine became one of the foundational texts of modern Western esotericism. For others, it remained an ambitious but highly speculative philosophical system. Its influence, however, is undeniable. The movement that had begun with Helena Blavatsky and Henry Steel Olcott was about to enter a new phase. A remarkable woman, already famous as a social reformer, political activist, and advocate for women's rights, would soon become one of its most important leaders. Her name was Annie Besant, and under her guidance, the Theosophical Society would grow into a truly global organization while becoming deeply involved in one of history's greatest struggles for national independence. The Theosophical Society, Part 4. Annie Besant, Charles Leadbeater, and the Search for the World Teacher. When Helena Petrovna Blavatsky died in London on May 8, 1891, many wondered whether the Theosophical Society could survive without its charismatic founder. She had been its principal philosopher, most prolific writer, and public face. Yet the movement she helped create was only beginning its greatest period of growth. Over the next 40 years, new leaders would expand Theosophy across the globe, introduce millions to Eastern philosophy, and become involved in one of the most unusual spiritual movements of the 20th century. The death of Helena Blavatsky. Blavatsky's passing marked the end of the Society's founding era. She was only 59 years old. Although her health had declined for years, she remained intellectually active until the end, writing articles, corresponding with students, and revising her teachings. Following her death, members around the world commemorated her life. To many theosophists, she had reopened humanity's connection to what they regarded as the ancient wisdom tradition. Outside the Society, historians viewed her as one of the 19th century's most influential figures in the Western occult revival. Regardless of perspective, few doubted her enormous impact. The question now became, who would lead the Society? Henry Steel Olcott. Colonel Henry Steel Olcott remained president. Unlike Blavatsky, Olcott rarely presented himself as a mystic. He was, above all, an organizer. Methodical and practical, he spent years traveling throughout India, Sri Lanka, Europe, Australia, and America, establishing branches of the Society. His greatest contribution may have been transforming a philosophical movement into an international institution. He promoted education, encouraged interfaith dialogue, and strengthened relationships with Buddhist communities throughout Asia. Many historians credit Olcott with helping revive Buddhist education in Sri Lanka after centuries of colonial rule. His reputation there remains exceptionally high. Yet, Olcott understood that the Society also needed a powerful public speaker, capable of inspiring new generations. That person soon appeared. Annie Besant. Annie Besant was one of the most remarkable women of the Victorian era. Born in London in 1847, she initially became famous not as a mystic, but as a social reformer. Her life before joining Theosophy had already been extraordinary. She campaigned for workers' rights, women's education, birth control, religious freedom, secularism, labor reform. She wrote extensively, debated publicly, and became one of Britain's best-known political activists. Her willingness to challenge established institutions earned both admiration and criticism. Few people who knew Annie Besant during those early years could have predicted that she would eventually become one of the world's leading advocates for Eastern spirituality. Discovering the Secret Doctrine. In 1889, Besant read The Secret Doctrine. She later described the experience as life-changing. Rather than dismissing Blavatsky's ideas, she became deeply intrigued by their philosophical depth. She soon sought out Blavatsky personally. The two developed a close friendship during the final years of Blavatsky's life. Besant rapidly became one of the Society's most gifted lecturers. Her eloquence, intelligence, and organizational skills impressed audiences throughout Britain and Europe. After Blavatsky's death, Besant emerged as one of the movement's most influential leaders. A new president, Henry Steel Olcott, remained president until his death in 1907. Following his passing, Annie Besant was elected president of the International Theosophical Society. Under her leadership, membership expanded significantly. New lodges opened across Europe, Australia, New Zealand, North America, South America, India. The society increasingly became a worldwide movement rather than one centered primarily in Europe and India. Besant believed Theosophy should not remain confined to philosophical discussion. It should actively improve society. Education. Education became one of Besant's greatest passions. She believed spiritual development required intellectual development. Among her major accomplishments was helping establish what later became Banaras Hindu University, one of India's leading educational institutions. Although many individuals contributed to the university's creation, Besant played an important early role in promoting higher education rooted in both modern scholarship and Indian cultural traditions. Her educational philosophy influenced generations of students. Indian independence. Besant's interests extended beyond spirituality. She became deeply involved in India's movement toward self-government. At a time when India remained under British colonial rule, she argued that Indians should have greater control over their own political future. In 1916, she helped found the Home Rule League, advocating constitutional self-government. Her political activism led British authorities to place her under house arrest in 1917. The decision sparked widespread protests. Soon afterward, she became president of the Indian National Congress, one of the country's leading political organizations. Although later overshadowed by figures such as Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, Besant remains an important figure in the history of India's independence movement. Charles Webster Leadbeater. Another influential figure during this period was Charles Webster Leadbeater. Originally an Anglican priest, Leadbeater joined the Theosophical Society in the 1880s. He became known for his extensive writings on clairvoyance, meditation, subtle bodies, chakras, and spiritual evolution. Leadbeater claimed to possess highly developed clairvoyant abilities. According to his writings, he could observe invisible aspects of reality, including human auras, thought forms, and higher dimensions of consciousness. These descriptions became enormously influential within 20th century metaphysical literature. Many popular modern ideas concerning chakras and subtle energy bodies were shaped by Leadbeater's books, The Chakras. Although chakras originated within ancient Indian traditions, Leadbeater's illustrations and descriptions introduced them to many Western readers. He described 7 principal energy centers corresponding to different aspects of spiritual development. His colorful diagrams became widely reproduced. Today, they remain among the most recognizable images associated with modern metaphysical thought. Scholars note that Leadbeater's interpretations reflected both traditional Indian concepts and his own theosophical framework. Occult chemistry. Perhaps Leadbeater's most unusual collaboration involved Annie Besant. Together they published Occult Chemistry. Using what they described as clairvoyant observation, they attempted to describe the structure of atoms and subatomic particles. Supporters regarded the work as evidence that consciousness could perceive realities beyond ordinary vision. Scientists generally did not accept these methods or conclusions, and occult chemistry has not been incorporated into mainstream physics. Nevertheless, the book remains one of the more unusual attempts to combine spiritual perception with scientific inquiry. Controversy. Leadbeater's career was not without controversy. In the early 20th century, allegations concerning his advice to certain young male students led to his resignation from the society for a period. The matter generated significant internal disagreement. Some members believed the accusations reflected serious errors in judgment. Others accepted Leadbeater's explanations and supported his eventual return. Historians continue to discuss these events, and they remain among the more controversial chapters in the Society's history. Despite these disputes, Leadbeater remained an influential author whose books continue to be read within Theosophical circles. A young boy on the beach. One afternoon in 1909, while walking along the beach near the Society's headquarters in Adyar, Leadbeater noticed a thin, quiet Indian boy playing with friends. According to Leadbeater, what caught his attention was not the boy's appearance, but what he believed to be an extraordinary aura. He later wrote that he had never seen such purity. The boy's name was Jiddu Krishnamurti. Leadbeater believed Krishnamurti possessed exceptional spiritual potential. Soon, Annie Besant also became convinced. The Society assumed responsibility for Krishnamurti's education with the permission of his family following legal proceedings. He received an international education under the guidance of leading Theosophists. The world teacher Besant and Leadbeater believed humanity periodically receives guidance from great spiritual teachers. Within Theosophical teaching, figures such as the Buddha and Christ represented manifestations of this universal spiritual office. They came to believe that Krishnamurti would become the vehicle for the next world teacher. To prepare for this anticipated event, they established an international organization called the Order of the Star in the East. Branches quickly appeared around the world. Thousands joined, large gatherings were organized, books were published, lectures attracted enormous audiences. For many members, history seemed to be approaching a profound spiritual turning point. Yet no one could foresee what Krishnamurti himself would eventually decide. The young man who had been prepared for decades to lead a worldwide spiritual movement would ultimately reject the role entirely. His decision would become one of the most dramatic moments in the history of modern spirituality. A movement at its peak. By the 1920s, the Theosophical Society had become one of the world's largest and most influential esoteric organizations. Its books had been translated into numerous languages. Its lectures attracted audiences across Europe, Asia, Australia, and the Americas. Its influence reached artists, educators, philosophers, psychologists, political leaders, and religious thinkers. Concepts such as karma, reincarnation, meditation, and spiritual evolution were becoming increasingly familiar to Western audiences. Many of these ideas entered mainstream culture through channels that the Society had helped establish. Yet its greatest challenge still lay ahead. In 1929, Jiddu Krishnamurti would stand before thousands of devoted followers and deliver a speech that fundamentally altered the course of Theosophical history. With a few carefully chosen words, he would dissolve the organization created specifically for him and declare, "Truth is a pathless land." The consequences would reverberate throughout the metaphysical world for generations. The Theosophical Society, Part 5. Krishnamurti, Controversy, Modern Influence, and the Society Today. For more than 20 years, members of the Theosophical Society had prepared for what many believed would be one of history's greatest spiritual events. A young Indian named Jiddu Krishnamurti had been educated, guided, and introduced to the world as the possible vehicle for the coming world teacher. Thousands believed a new era of spiritual awakening was about to begin. Then, in 1929, everything changed. The gathering at Amen. During the summer of 1929, several thousand people gathered in Amen, the Netherlands. Many had traveled great distances. Some had spent years preparing for this event. Members of the Order of the Star believed they were witnessing the beginning of a new spiritual age. Krishnamurti, now in his mid-30s, stepped before the assembled audience. What followed became one of the most remarkable speeches in modern spiritual history. "Truth is a pathless land," Krishnamurti began quietly. Then he announced something few expected. He declared that he was dissolving the Order of the Star. The organization created specifically to prepare the world for him would cease to exist immediately. He explained his decision with words that would become famous throughout the world. Truth is a pathless land. He continued by saying that no organization could lead another person to truth. No religion, no teacher, no philosophy, no authority. Truth, he argued, must be discovered directly by each individual. It could not be handed to someone else. The audience was stunned. For many members, this announcement overturned more than 20 years of preparation. Some accepted Krishnamurti's reasoning. Others felt shocked and deeply disappointed. Returning property. Krishnamurti's actions reinforced the sincerity of his decision. He returned the wealth and property that had been placed under the order's control. He declined the role of spiritual leader that others had prepared for him. Instead, he devoted the remainder of his life to independent teaching. Over the next 60 years, Krishnamurti traveled throughout Europe, India, Australia, and the United States. His lectures focused on self-observation, psychological freedom, fear, conditioning, meditation, and direct awareness. Although his philosophy differed substantially from mainstream theosophy, many scholars note that his early education within the society helped shape his lifelong interest in consciousness. Annie Besant's response. For Annie Besant, Krishnamurti's decision was heartbreaking. She had devoted decades to preparing for what she believed was a pivotal spiritual event. Yet, she continued to respect Krishnamurti personally. Although disappointed, she remained committed to the broader mission of the Theosophical Society. She continued leading the organization until her death in 1933. By then, she had spent more than 40 years promoting education, comparative religion, universal brotherhood, and Indian self-government. Historians remember Annie Besant not only as one of Theosophy's greatest leaders, but also as one of the most influential women of her era. A new generation. Following the deaths of Blavatsky, Olcott, and Besant, leadership gradually passed to succeeding generations. Unlike many religious movements founded around a single charismatic individual, the Theosophical Society continued functioning through elected international presidents and local lodges. Its headquarters remained in Adyar, India. Over time, additional organizations inspired by Theosophy also emerged. Among the best known were the Pasadena Theosophical Society, the United Lodge of Theosophists. Although these organizations shared many of Blavatsky's original teachings, they developed independently and sometimes differed in emphasis or administration. Influence beyond Theosophy. One measure of the Society's importance lies not simply in its membership, but in its influence. During the 20th century, ideas first introduced to many Western readers through Theosophy spread into psychology, education, literature, comparative religion, and popular spirituality. Today, concepts such as karma, reincarnation, meditation, chakras, spiritual evolution, universal consciousness are widely recognized throughout Western culture. Many of these ideas were already ancient within Asian traditions. However, historians widely acknowledge that the Theosophical Society played an important role in introducing them to European and American audiences. Influence on Rudolf Steiner. One of the Society's early leaders in Germany was Rudolf Steiner. Initially active within the Theosophical movement, Steiner later developed his own philosophical system known as Anthroposophy. Anthroposophy expanded into numerous practical fields including education, agriculture, medicine, architecture, the arts. Today, Waldorf schools, founded upon Steiner's educational philosophy, operate in many countries. Although Steiner eventually separated from the Theosophical Society, historians recognize significant intellectual connections between his early work and Theosophy. Alice Bailey. Another influential figure was Alice Bailey. Originally a member of the Theosophical Society, Bailey later established her own independent teachings. Her books introduced concepts such as the seven rays, esoteric psychology, spiritual hierarchy, world service. Bailey's writings became highly influential within the 20th century New Age movement. Carl Jung's Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung was not a theosophist. Nevertheless, scholars have noted parallels between Jung's work and ideas circulating within the broader esoteric revival influenced by Theosophy. Jung explored archetypes, symbolism, collective unconscious, Eastern philosophy, alchemy. While his psychology developed independently, both Jung and the Theosophists shared a deep interest in myth, symbolism, dreams, and comparative religion. Manly P. Hall, Canadian-born philosopher Manly P. Hall became one of America's most respected writers on symbolism and esoteric traditions. Although independent of the society, Hall admired many aspects of Blavatsky's work. His classic book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, reflects the same broad interest in comparative religion and ancient wisdom that characterized Theosophy. Edgar Cayce. The celebrated American clairvoyant Edgar Cayce also addressed themes familiar to many Theosophists. Although Cayce did not belong to the society, his readings discussed reincarnation, karma, Atlantis, and spiritual development. These similarities contributed to the growing popularity of metaphysical ideas throughout the 20th century. The New Age movement. By the 1960s and 1970s, Western interest in Eastern philosophy had expanded dramatically. Yoga, meditation, holistic health, consciousness studies, alternative spirituality. Many of these movements developed independently. Others drew directly or indirectly upon ideas that the Theosophical Society had helped popularize decades earlier. For this reason, historians often describe Theosophy as one of the intellectual foundations of the modern New Age movement. Criticism. The Society has also faced substantial criticism throughout its history. Some scholars questioned Blavatsky's historical claims. Others challenged reports of psychic phenomena. The authenticity of the Mahatma letters remains debated. Leadbeater's conduct generated internal controversy. Modern historians continue to examine these issues carefully. Most academic studies distinguish between the Society's historical development, the philosophical teachings it promoted, claims regarding paranormal experiences. This distinction allows researchers to evaluate documented events while recognizing that many metaphysical teachings lie outside the scope of empirical historical verification. The Society today, the international headquarters remains at Adyar, near Chennai, India. Branches operate in many countries. Members continue studying comparative religion, philosophy, ethics, meditation, ancient wisdom traditions. The Society maintains libraries, lecture programs, educational activities, publications, and conferences. Its original 3 objects remain largely unchanged from those adopted in 1875. Although membership is smaller than during its early 20th century peak, the Society continues attracting individuals interested in comparative religion and spiritual philosophy. A lasting legacy. Nearly 150 years after its founding, the Theosophical Society occupies a unique place in history. It did not create the concepts of karma, reincarnation, or meditation. Those teachings had existed for centuries within Asian traditions. Its contribution was different. It helped build a bridge between East and West, between science and spirituality, between ancient traditions and modern inquiry. Whether one agrees with its philosophical conclusions or not, the Society encouraged millions of people to look beyond the boundaries of their own culture and explore humanity's diverse spiritual heritage. Its influence can be seen in modern psychology, comparative religion, interfaith dialogue, holistic education, meditation, yoga, and the broader metaphysical movement. Few organizations have done more to stimulate Western interest in the spiritual traditions of Asia. The story of the Theosophical Society is one of bold ideas, remarkable personalities, and enduring questions. It began with Helena Blavatsky's vision of an ancient wisdom shared by all humanity. It grew through Steel Olcott's organizational leadership. It expanded under Annie Besant's extraordinary energy. It faced triumphs, controversies, divisions, and renewal. Its influence reached educators, philosophers, psychologists, artists, political leaders, and spiritual seekers around the world. For supporters, it represents an ongoing search for universal truth and human unity. For critics, it remains a fascinating example of 19th century esoteric thought and its impact on modern culture. For historians, it stands as one of the most influential spiritual movements of the modern era. Whether viewed as philosophy, religion, or cultural history, the Theosophical Society continues to invite one of humanity's oldest questions. Can wisdom be found by looking beyond the boundaries that divide us and by searching for the truths we share?